That pledge allegiance to the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First business, oath of office. We have two newcomers.
Okay, if you two can stand, raise your right hand. Okay, raise your right hand, repeat after me. I do solemnly swear
I do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of this state,
and the Constitution of this state,
and that I will faithfully perform
and that I will faithfully perform
the duties of the office of council member
council member
in and for the city of Norway,
in and for the city of Norway,
county of Dickinson,
county of Dickinson,
and state of Michigan,
and state of Michigan,
according to the best of my ability, so help me God.
according to the best of my ability, so help me God.
All right, thank you. And you two just want to sign, one of you can sign here and one of you can sign here.
Trish, do we have to have Mr. Pop? No? Okay.
He's good.
Why don't we do it just to be safe? Because he was just elected in.
Oh,
Doesn't
let's
hurt
do another oath?
to make him do it. He was just elected, and I think it's appropriate.
Okay, you two can sign
Sorry.
it. Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
That I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of this state,
and the Constitution of the state,
and that I will faithfully perform
and that I will faithfully perform
the duties of
the duties of
the office of
the office of
council member
council member
in and for the city of Norway,
and for the city of Norway,
county of Dickinson,
County of Dickinson,
and state of Michigan,
and state of Michigan,
according to the best of my ability, so help me God.
according to the best of my ability, so help me God.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Before we go any farther, I'd like to welcome back former Mayor, Mr. Jeremy Oja, and also our new member, Mr. Brett Kramer. Next order of business, election of mayor. We'll need excuse me. I would like to nominate Mrs. Candy Booth for mayor.
Support.
Mrs. Brew? Yes. Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
Mr. Oja?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
And now, election of mayor pro tem.
I nominate Lee Mangini.
I will accept.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
Mr. Oja?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
And now I can turn everything over to Mrs. Brew.
I'd like to thank the council for voting me mayor. Hopefully I will serve the citizens well. I also would like to make a comment. I do believe that I am the first woman to ever be a mayor in the city of Norway. So that's pretty exciting. And we'll go on with the meeting. Approval of the agenda. Any changes or anything? Nope.
We do still need to do the roll call, too.
Okay. Want me to go back to the roll call? Do you want me to go back to the roll call first?
Yeah.
Okay, roll call.
Mrs. Brew?
Here.
Mr. Kramer?
Here.
Mr. Menegini?
Here.
Mr. Oja?
Here.
Mr. Pop?
Here.
Now we'll move on to the approval of the agenda.
I'll make a motion, we approve the agenda.
Support.
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
Mr. Oja?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
We'll move on to the approval of the minutes. Any questions on the minutes? If not, we need a motion.
Make a motion, we, regular meetings for November 6th, 2017.
Support.
Mr. Oja?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
We'll move on to the approval of the manifest. Do you have any questions, Mr. Pop?
I have none tonight.
Mr. Kramer, any questions on the manifest?
No, I do not.
Mr. Mangini?
No, thank you.
I just got one on the first page. The repairs on the folder stuffer, how much do we actually use that now that we don't have the utility bills processed here?
We use it for taxes,
Okay,
right?
I just,
What was the,
We use it for shut-off notices. It's not used a lot.
Right.
We did these repairs, because the guy thought that for what we were spending, it would work pretty good for us. We've just been having some issues with it. We won't put any more money into it. We just don't use it enough. Shut-off notices, some of the notices Jim does.
Yeah.
Taxes now we're doing with Luff's advertiser, so,
but it's down to the notices?
yeah.
So it's
Yeah,
a small
We're not
volume.
using it very much.
that's my only question.
My only question is, from the manifest from the last meeting, because I wasn't here, I had come in and Lee had questioned on this, that amount that went into the, taken out of the fire department for the, M-Power.
Yeah.
Did you go in and credit that yet, or?
Yeah, I made that change in the general ledger, charged it to electric.
Okay. Thank you. Do I have a motion on the manifest?
I'll make a motion, we approve manifest 2017-22 in the amount of $276,855.52.
Support.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes?
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
Mr. Oja?
Yes.
We'll move on to the public hearing. Is there any questions in the audience on anything that's on the agenda tonight? If not, there'll be a chance later on for public comments. Okay, then we'll move on to our presentation of our audit.
I know not right now, but.
It'll come greater as it warms up. First, I'd like to thank the council for engaging me to perform the audit of the city for the year ended June 30th, 2017. I thought that the audit went very well this year. I recommended fewer audit adjustments, which is a real compliment to the staff. Means that the bookkeeping practices continue to improve, and that's always a positive thing. You received a book that is 100 and some pages from me with a couple of loose letters in there. And what I do with the slideshow that I'm about to go through is attempt to summarize what I feel are some of the important points that are contained within that book, and also to show you some information, actually it's not in the book as far as the trends go, with some fund balance numbers. And then I'll conclude by talking about the letter of comments and recommendations and some general impression things. But going over to the slide, the page numbers that are on the slides refer to the page numbers that are in the bound copy of the audit report. So if you look at page 5, that's where the audit opinion actually begins. And you can see that the audit opinion is unmodified. Unmodified is the highest level of opinion that we as CPAs can render on a set of financial statements. It says that I audited them in accordance with governmental auditing standards and that the records are kept in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles for the United States of America. Management discussion analysis, that is prepared by the management and talks about primarily last year and what went on, things that went well, things that didn't go so well. Goes on for about 5 or 6 pages within the statements. That is something that the GASB, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, requires accompany a set of financial statements. It is not something that I have audited, although I did go through the document just for consistency with the audited numbers and make sure that they matched. Looking at the individual funds, starting with the general fund, and start out just on a summary. This is on page 19, actually, of the audit report. The general fund saw revenues for the year ended June 30th of $2.78 million. Saw operating expenses of $2.364 million and transfers of $304,000, all of which are reflected there with the various bars, yielding a gain this year of $116,000 in the general fund. So clearly good that you took in more money than what you spent. That's money is set aside then for providing future services or for any emergencies that may come up in the future. Looking at the general fund on a historical basis, looking back, this is the fund balance number. You can see with the first bar, this reads from left to right, so that trend is good, that it continues to rise. You can see that back in 2013, we were at $385,000. We then jumped, and the scale over here is fairly large, so we then jumped to $529,000, then to $596,000, to $672,000, and now it's $789,000. So that trend of continuing to increase your general fund is not something that I always see, but it certainly bodes well for the city of Norway. The Major Street Fund, which is the other governmental major fund, as defined by the GASB. You can see that this goes back to 2013 when we had a fund balance of $1,000, jumped to $45,000, to $50,000, to $90,000, and this year to $127,000. It's not like you're wealthy in that fund, because if we have a lot of snow this winter, as is being predicted, we could consume a lot of that money. But we have had a couple of easier winters, and it has allowed us to not expend all of the dollars that have come into that fund. Looking at the non-major funds, and I've summarized these 3 on a page. The local street fund, you can see is very small numbers down here. Starts out at $1,000, goes to $13,000, and then drops off to each year below $1,000 in fund balance. So that's, and that is for taking care of your, not your primary roads here within the city, but your residential roads, those kinds of things primarily. The DDA, which is the middle set here, you can see it's fairly flat across the top. A couple of years, starting at the left at $243,000, going to $250,000, dropping back to $240,000, and then increasing to $259,000. Certainly a comfortable number, and that way if you did have an opportunity for the DDA to assist with new businesses coming in or other improvements in your downtown district, you do have some funds there available to the city in order to accomplish that. The fire fund, which is the set here, you can see is very flat. It varies from 20,000, went up to 22,000 this year, but that has just been a very stagnant number. Again, not an abundance of money there, but certainly we are holding our own. We're not going backwards at least, so that's a good trend as far as that goes. And we don't want to accumulate a lot of money in our fire fund anyway. As long as we've got enough to operate and to buy equipment and pay for the services and whatnot, that's where we want to be within that fund. The museum fund, you can see, and the scales here changed. So you can see that has gone up and now kind of stabilized. Went from 43,000 to 48,000 to 54,000 to 59,000, and rolled back just a little bit this past year at 58,000. The debt service fund, you can see there's no bars at all there. The debt service fund is we take money, we roll money into that fund, and we spend it all to pay debt. So it's not intended to have a fund balance, nor does it. It is operated actually exactly as it's designed within the accounting rules. The capital projects, and you can see this goes down and up and down. That's not anything to be alarmed about. The whole gist of a capital project fund is you set aside some money and then you spend a bunch in 1 year to take care of whatever the project happens to be, and then you start saving again for whatever the other future needs are. So you can see that that's gone from 26,000, dropped down to 11,000, jumped up to 40,000 to 54,000, and this year rolled back to 39,000. Don't see anything within that fund that's a particular alarm to me. It continues to operate, and we move dollars through that fund as we buy equipment and those kind of things. The Communication Systems Fund, this is formerly known as the TV Fund, cable TV, internet, and telephones. And this is unrestricted net position. The definition of that in layman's terms is that's the amount of spendable money that you have within that fund. So you can see that going back to 2013, we were upside down 218,000, recovered to 109,000, recovered to positive 5,000, dropped to, the last year dropped to a $1,000 loss, and this year we dropped to a $29,000 loss. That's a fund that you're going to need to keep an eye on as you head forward. The TV end of things in particular is you're not losing a lot of clientele in that fund, but it does seem to be going backwards, a negative trend. And because of the nature of the fixed costs that you have within that fund, to add one more customer in that fund changes the cost virtually not at all. That's what I mean by fixed cost. Or if we lose one, it changes the cost virtually not at all. So we have a very fixed base in there, so the idea is you want to be continuing to increase the number of customers that you have, and we have been successful in doing that in the internet and telephone area, but not in the television area. So that's, and as you evaluate that in the future, I certainly encourage the council to take a look at those pieces of that fund separately, because I think the results of that are going to be, you got a couple of winners in there, and maybe one that is not performing nearly as well. The electric fund continues to be, and keep in mind we've got a very large scale on this, continues to be a real winner within the city. We do transfers from the electric fund to assist operations, general operations, and have done that for a number of years. You can see that we've gone from $1.5 million to $1,876,000 to $2,265,000, dropped backwards a year ago to just less than $2 million, and this year we ended the year at $2.278 million. So certainly that continues to be a real cash cow for the city. Excuse me. The performance within that fund, and when you look at the individual pieces, I'm going to talk about this in just a couple of minutes as well, but the expenses in there were substantially less. As I think everybody knows, we had an extremely rainy summer into the fall season, and as a result, we were able to produce a lot more power than what we have in the past. So instead of having to go out and buy that power on the open market to resell it, we were able to produce that power, which we can do substantially cheaper than having to acquire it from WPPI. The water fund, this is a fund that has dropped off and continues to drop off. However, don't make any knee-jerk reactions with this one yet, because you're in the middle of a project, or at the conclusion of a project. I shouldn't say the middle of it anymore. You were at the point in time that this was put together. And so that has gone down on a steady basis. It is something that you will need to evaluate what your rate structure is, because as part of your bond ordinance, it says in there that you're going to show a profit. Keep in mind that we have spent money that we had within the system. We've been borrowing as far as the project goes. So that fund will, in the future, you're probably going to be in a position where you're going to need to at least evaluate that to make sure that your rates are adequate, because that's the commitment that you made as part of the bond ordinance that the city has with the bonds that were signed this year with rural development. The sewer fund, you can see that one also has continued to drop off, and that's another one. We did do a handsome recovery, actually, of expenses that were spent over the past several years, but the dollars that were out there, some of those had been consumed within the operations. Again, this is not really a year to do that evaluation. Let's take a look at it, as you head forward, as those projects do come to completion. Again, you're probably going to have to take a look at how your rates are looking. You'll probably, I would imagine that rural development will be asking you, do we have a plan in order to make sure that they're going to get repaid? At this point in time, we're still incurring some one-time kind of costs. But those I would expect are going to take care of themselves within the next couple of months. And then you'll be able to do a real evaluation of where that fund is going to be. On an overall basis, and these pages are on 19 and 22, financial performance, we saw an increase again in the general fund, an increase in the major street fund, increase in the other governmental funds, which are the smaller ones that I talked about earlier. TV, the communication fund saw a decrease. Electric, we saw an increase, as I talked about. Water fund actually increased with the reimbursements where we've taken costs and capitalized them, and the sewer fund as well. From an operational perspective, they went backwards, but with the additional dollars that came in, it's okay. One real bright note this year, for you folks that have been on the council for a couple of years at least, you listen to me stand before you and tell you that MERS performance has been going backwards, and as a result, your underfunded situation, your pension plan has been getting substantially worse. This year, the MERS, the pension plan, actually outperformed the 7.75% estimate that they had. They actually earned more than 10% for the first time since I can remember. 1 year does not make a trend, but 1 year is better than no years, which is where we were a year ago. So I stood here and criticized MERS last year. I will certainly give them a compliment this year. They did have a good year, and as a result, with the funding that the city has done and with the additional earnings that were realized, we actually we're still underfunded substantially, but the amount of the underfunding was actually reduced this year, which is good, and that's without large additional contributions from the city. You can see that return, I just made a parenthetic note there that it was over 10% during the year. OPEB is other post-employment benefits. That is health insurance for retirees is the primary thing that we're doing. And we are required to fund that on a prospective basis while the person is working so that the dollars are out there when the person retires to pay for their insurance throughout the period that they live where they are going to be drawing the benefit. The OPEB, we did not have a new study done this year. The funding, actually, we overfunded it just slightly. We actually funded it exactly at the prior year amount, which was about $94,000. But because of the earnings within the fund and whatnot, we actually slightly overfunded it. We're still short as far as the total funding goes, but we did do a small amount of excess funding there. You can see on an overall basis, we had a net gain of $1.22 million. That's on page 16 on the government-wide basis. And the pension expense for the year went from about $1 million the prior year with the loss in it down to $512,000 this year, which is actually less than what you had contributed. And that's because of the earnings that we saw on the MERS plan. There were no material weaknesses. This is in the letter of comments and recommendations, which is one of the two letters that were loose within the book. No significant deficiencies and no material non-compliance findings. That's exactly what you want to see as a council. You don't want to, those are all bad things, and the fact that we don't have any of them is a real compliment to the management and the staff. Other matters, I did repeat one comment from a year ago. We do have some delinquencies within the utility billing system, the accounts receivable there. We had really concentrated on getting the system operational throughout the prior year. Not the year I'm auditing here, the year prior. Continue to have some growing pains with that system. The staff I know has been working diligently at that. We actually recovered slightly from where we've been. We have tried collection agencies and whatnot in the past without very much success. We have begun placing those delinquent utility bills onto property tax bills. That seems to me to be by far the most effective way of collecting those delinquencies. You can upset folks that own rental properties because they may end up with a bill that they weren't expecting, but the lien on that actually ties to the real property, so whoever owns it is responsible for that, for the taxes that are there. Like I said, we did see a slight improvement from where we were a year ago. We talked about this, I talked about this at the exit conference with the manager and with the treasurer, and it continues to be not the highest priority, and I understand that, and I agree with that decision. but it's, at some point in time, it's an area that we are going backward, not going backwards, we have gone, we improved slightly this year, but it remains at a relatively high level, and in the financial statements, I use a 7.5%, say I do, we the city, use a 7.5% uncollectible factor. That's not a real excessive number. Seems to have been fairly realistic with what we have seen as we, what our experience has been. But that's an area of concentration. Really, it takes manpower, hours to do those follow-ups and to make sure that you've got procedures in place, and that when there is a bill that meets the criteria for being placed on a property tax bill or whatever other collection methodologies the city may have, that you want to make sure that those get adhered to all the time. And that's, I've tried to summarize what's in here in that series of slides. As I stated earlier, the overall audit went very well. When I ask questions here, it's, if folks don't know, they tell me they don't know. That doesn't happen very rarely here, which is a compliment to all the staff. The questions are handled readily. They know where the problem areas are before I even start looking at them, and many times actually bring them to me and ask me for my advice in a given area. So which reflects well, and it also is a strengthening of the, in my opinion, of the internal control system here when you've got those things already identified. So that being said, I would be happy to try and answer any questions that the council may have of me.
I have a question, Scott.
Sure.
The underfunded in our pension, what % are we talking here? I looked through there and I couldn't find it. I know we're in a lot better shape than a bunch of other communities.
Yes, we are. There are a couple of pension schedules included in the book. At the conclusion of the required supplemental information, which is on pages 60, there's some on 67, and there's some on 66. If you look at the schedules on page 66, okay, you'll see that the total pension liability is about not quite $20 million, and that we've got about $8.4 million in assets. So we are about, on an overall basis, about 42% funded.
42%, okay. I believe that's a little better than last year.
Yes, it is. It's up from 4, it was right at 40 a year ago.
Was it 40? Okay.
Yep. And this particular schedule, you can see it's built to be out there for 10 years. That earlier information, because of some changes that were made with the GASB 68, they've redefined some of these things, so those earlier years are not available to us. But that will fill in as your years go on.
Okay, and you know the next question, because I've been asking you for 8 years now.
Yes.
On a scale of 1 to 10, where do we sit?
Well, and I knew it was coming, so I would say that based on the fact that you, the city, received an investment grade rating on a recent bond proposal that was set forth, that I've probably understated where you have been at. And you would not, if you weren't at least at a 7, you would have not gotten an investment grade. And I will bow to the expertise of the folks from New York. I can't remember which of the rating agencies gave the city investment grade, but it's one of the major major players. Maybe Ray could help me with who that was.
Standard and Poor, S&P.
S&P? Okay, yeah. Standard & Poor's. So, I mean, they're one of the 3 really very, very large rating agencies that are out there. So,
Good.
And, you know, as you look at it, the progression has continued to come, and I hope that MERS continues to perform as they did this past year, or even if they went backwards a little bit, that they continue to exceed the 7 3/4 performance that we did, that they put into the assumptions at this point.
That's all I have.
Scott, one point on the bond rating, that was on the general fund. So that didn't take into account the electric fund or other utility funds.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, so they just looked at our general fund.
Yeah. And clearly, the electric fund, I mean, if you look at just your electric fund standalone, is in much, much better condition than your general fund.
Any other questions? No? Thank you, Mr. Kenny.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to Resolution 2017-27.
I'll make a motion that we accept Resolution 2017-27.
I'll support.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes?
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Menigini?
Yes.
Mr. Oja?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
We'll move on to the approval USDA Road Water Project pay request.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Mayor. I said that before. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
What we have before you is standard practice for our water and sewer projects over the course of the summer. At the second meeting of every month, Mead and Hunt has prepared the pay requests for, you see there's 4 items. One is for the water project, then the sanitary sewer project, the wastewater treatment plant project, and then pay request for local share, which is surface work that we did in conjunction. Wasn't project eligible reconstruction, but we decided to take care of it because we were in the area. Bruce, do you have any comments on the pay requests, or they're pretty straightforward?
I really don't, unless anybody's got questions.
So I guess we'll be looking for motions to approve each one individually.
Do we have a motion on the USDA RD Water Project pay request?
I'll make a motion, we approve USDA RD Water Project pay request
Can you state the amount, please, too?
for the amount of $193,598.96.
Support.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Menigini?
Yes.
Mr. Oja?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes. We'll move on to the approval of the USDA Sanitary Sewer Project pay request. Do we have a motion?
I make the motion. We approve the water project pay request in the amount of $239,421.21.
Support.
Mr. Menigini?
Yes.
Mr. Oja?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
We'll move on to the approval of the USDA RDWWTP project pay request. We have a motion.
I'll make a motion that USDA RDWWTP project pay request in the amount of $626,535.43.
Support.
Mr. Oja?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Menigini?
Yes.
We'll move on to the water sewer project local share pay request.
I'll make a motion, we approve water sewer project local share pay request for the amount of $66,864.53.
Support.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes?
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Menigini?
Yes.
Mr. Oja?
Yes.
We'll move on to the water sewer project.
This particular item is certificate of substantial completion. We've had our inspector from Mead and Hunt on the site, as well as our water and sewer department. They have indicated there's a small punch list item. Bruce, maybe you can respond as to how we're going to handle the punch list versus the substantial completion. But one other thing to note, under the definition of substantial completion, it's in operation. It is complete other than cleanup activities, surface cleanup activities, which we do have retention, so.
First of all, after Sunday, I am starting to feel like I understand how Lions fans felt.
Don't be looking at me.
Wow. Okay, so what happens with substantial completion, that's when a portion of a project or an entire project is functioning with its intended use. And sometimes we'll do a portion of a project. This time we just waited till the end. It does a couple other things. It sets the date for the start of the one-year warranty period. And it allows the city to consider reducing retainage prior to making a final payment. We have a pretty small, like Ray said, punch list item that we've gone through. There's 6 or 7 things on there. So you had a normal pay request tonight. We have a balancing change order in process to final out all the final quantities. And Baco was reviewing that. It was put together with their people and our guy, Terry. But they're taking a final look at it. And that could be on your agenda for your next meeting. I will give you a little heads up that if the numbers don't change, we're looking at a deduct on the water side of $88,000 and a deduct on the sewer side of $109,000. The water project is a loan project, and the way that works now is that there's loan money to give back. RD gives you the money, you write them a check, they apply it to the principal, and then your interest payments would be reduced accordingly going forward. I may have told you in the past, their policy used to be that they used to fold it and apply it at the end so you could pay it off early. They changed the way they do that now. So you make a principal payment with the leftover money, if it's loan, and then your interest payments get recalculated and get reduced going forward. On the sewer side, we're into the grant money, so there's potentially these numbers, $109,000 in grant funds to be returned to rural development. And unfortunately, not like in the past, and this started several years ago now, you cannot just come up with some other things you'd like to do on the sewer system and spend that money. Theory being that there's a lot of communities that need funding, and that if you haven't built it into your project at some point, they take those monies back and use them for other community needs. So, and I mentioned this to you before, this could be the case. So that's what's coming. We have to decide if we're going to close out the project, and when the punch list item is basically done, although some stuff like a certain amount of restoration that was done late that may have to have another look at next spring, just because the seeding was done so late that it may not take real well. So we have to decide whether we're going to close the project out, pay Baco all the money, and consider anything that comes up as a warranty item, or we're going to hold a certain amount of retainage until we get through all that. And I think that's what I'm thinking we should do. We have to decide whether that's $10,000 or $5,000 or some number. But what we would do is approve the balancing change order, and then we would have a pay request that would pay all the quantities and reduce retainage from its current amount down to a certain number that Ray and I will discuss and come up with and bring to you. And then it would sit till spring. And once we know all those items, any that can't be taken care of now, and some of those things on our list can be taken care of now, but anything that's remaining, we just let it go its course, and when that's all done and we're all happy with that, then we would make that final payment of the remaining retainage. That's where I think we're going there. I think the project came out pretty well. We don't have any claims or issues with Baco. The wastewater treatment plant project is just ongoing yet. There are some things that will continue, but there are some things that are going to have to be done in the spring. There's some painting and stuff that weather is just not going to allow us to meet the conditions for that. So that project is still in kind of normal sequence, I'll call it. So any questions with that? So what this does is substantial completion certificate sets the warranty period starting on November 8th, that's the date I used in here. So the one-year warranty starts on that date and ends in a year. So we'll have all winter, all summer, give them a thumbs up. Any questions?
Thank you, Bruce.
Okay, thanks.
Ray, do you feel comfortable that we've made substantial completion?
Yeah. As long as we withhold monies for restoration, we're down to those types of punch list items.
Okay.
Did we ever buy any equipment?
We haven't purchased the equipment yet. That's something that we're going to start talking about
Okay.
for the next meeting.
Okay. If there's no other questions, we need a motion.
One question for Bruce. In the certificate of substantial completion references the punch list of items to be completed or corrected is attached to the certificate. Do you have the punch list at this point, or is that's still being developed?
Well, yeah, it just kind of got finalized, and I can provide it to be attached to this, to the copies.
Okay. I just asked the council, as noted from Bruce, to hold back the amounts withheld for small restoration activities as noted in the recommendation, and then contingent on the attachment of the list as noted in the date of substantial completion.
Yeah, I don't think the substantial completion certificate reversed any money being dollar that. So we can attach the punch list.
I think when we come through with the balancing change order, I think we can address the retention that we need to hold.
Yeah, well, the change order will be a document of its own.
Mm-hmm.
What we will do is we will discuss and come up with that number for the following pay request. Change order doesn't have the retention issue.
Right, but then when we get to that point, you're going to have another pay request. We also have some other items within the, not just the contractor portion. You still have, Mead and Hunt still has a payment request out there. So there's some additional, and the equipment that the mayor mentioned.
Yeah, there would be one following pay request from Baco that would make all of the items current, and then the retainage would be reduced to what we think we come up with, what we agree with. That could happen at your second meeting next month. Before we can do that, the contractor's got to provide the consent of his surety, his bonding company to reduce retainage, and they have to provide all of the lien waivers to us. what I see happening is things come together. Your next meeting, first meeting in December, we have the change order. Your second meeting in December, we would have that pay request that would get everything paid up except for an X amount we hold in retainage, and there would not be anything until May or June.
There's no other questions, we need a motion.
I'll make a motion that the substantial completion request from Baco Construction be approved, provided that an approval payment amount be withheld to account for small restoration activities needed in the spring of 2018.
Support.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
Mr. Oja?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
We'll move on to the approval of building demolition, 310 C Street, Norway. Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Mrs. Mayor. We talked in the past about putting out for bids demolition of structures at 310 C Street. We did advertise, we received only one proposal from Moore and Excavating, and that's a cost of $4,395.
Is that considered a reasonable price rate? Because I think that's the
I think
amount
so.
they charge for the bar there.
I think so, he's got to cut the gas, the
Yeah, I
gas
see
line.
that.
and
Yeah,
he's
that's
got some
extra
work.
on there, yeah.
Yeah.
Just surprising he's the only one to bid on it. But I know he does good work.
If there's no other questions, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the demolition contract for 310 C Street with Moore and Excavating for a price not to exceed $4,395.
Support.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
Mr. Oja?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes. We'll move on to the approval of city facility carpet and floor cleaning.
This is something, again, we talked about that we needed to move forward with. We did advertise for quotes on this project, and we received two quotes, one from Affordable Carpet Care for $3,175, and then Tri-County Maintenance for $6,971. $6,972.
Now, I see, Ray, that's for floors at the city hall downstairs too, I'm assuming? Police department,
yes,
fire
and-
department, and the cabin down at the hydro.
Yes.
When was the last time we had this done? Do you remember? I sure don't. Never?
Well,
Oh.
we've done it here. at
We've
City
done it
Hall.
here. We've
But I mean, a
done it
complete
close.
job like this, it's never been done?
City Hall has. Yeah, but it's been a number of years
Yeah, okay.
since we've done it.
If there's no other questions, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion, Affordable Carpet Care Plus be approved to clean the floors at City Hall, Police Department, Fire Department, and Hydro Cabin for a price not to exceed $3,175.
Support.
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
Mr. Oja?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes?
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Okay, we'll move on to public comment. Anyone wishing to address the council on any item of interest shall do so at the podium. State your name and address for the records. Comments shall be limited to 5 minutes. And I just want to remind everybody, this is a time for public comment, not public debate.
No, does that include asking questions?
What?
Neil Jordan, 410 Chestnut Street. I'm kind of wondering about my FOIA. You're going to be 17 days when it says 10. Any reason why?
Do you want me to
No
respond?
reason, eh?
I know why. Under the law, you have 15 working days, so don't count calendar days, 15 working days.
10.
You have 5 days, and then you can request an additional 10.
I filed it on
I'm not
Halloween
going to say
day.
anymore.
Okay.
Okay. After the last council meeting, you said that yous were gonna take care of Neil. Explain that. You were gonna take care of me. In which way?
Neil, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay. Now we're gonna get down to who put the order out not to issue tickets in the school zone. And? No answer.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, there was no order to be put out.
There was an order by somebody. So, we're gonna get down to this corruption deal here. When you're impeding state laws being enforced, that's called corruption, Ray. I really don't have to say much. I'm sending everything to the Michigan Attorney Grievance Commission. Okay. Did the chief of police, did you get any work done on these new radar guns for your police car?
I was advised not to answer any questions asked of me by you this evening, Mr. Juteman, and I am going to abide by that.
Okay, so I'm asking the council to ask for their resignations or fire them. When police just sit there and don't write tickets, and it's on video, that's corruption, isn't it? Nobody wants to say nothing, eh? We hold the council accountable for them not writing tickets. It's their job. Let's see, how much time I got left? Then you manipulating where my child's gonna be picked up on a bus with no red lights. You contacted RNA Transportation and arranged this yourself, you and the chief of police. Do you know that it's not legal? That's a two-lane street with curbs. That's obstructing the flow of traffic. Red lights need to be used in the state of Michigan. When we filmed the lady the next day, she turned her lights on. Why? That's you. Want to answer?
Who's you, Mr. Juteman? Are you talking to me?
Yes, Mr. Carlson. Yep.
Neil, I'm not gonna get into a debate with you.
Okay.
It doesn't work.
And the special favors like Scott Pop, parking in the handicap parking spot. Why do you figure you should be able to park there at the veterans dinner? There's pictures of it. You don't deserve a ticket for parking in the handicap spot, eh?
Neil, do you know it's me?
Yeah, you. Did you get a ticket? I'll FOIA that tomorrow. So this corruption's gonna go a little bit further than tonight. You haven't even called me back, Lee. October 3rd this started. Nothing to say. It's pathetic. Thanks for your time. Tell them what the meters you got to go over. It's 3 of them, huh? 3 meters to get one to work.
Do we-
Thank you for your time.
Do we have anybody else in the audience?
Being the first woman mayor in Norway.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else in the audience that has any questions?
Okay, you can go to council comments.
All right. We'll move on to council comments. Scott, you have anything?
I'd just like to say congratulations on making mayor, and to you, Lee, for mayor pro temp. How many years now have you been at that?
Well, I've been here for 8 years.
8 years. Congratulations on that. I have one thing, you know that I would like to put out there in public, that we are doing something. There is something, looked into for the situation that's going up on the school. It's not addressed by anybody. Everyone have a happy Thanksgiving.
Do you want to just go ahead and have Jim explain what we're
Yeah.
doing, and why don't we do that? Why don't we
Okay.
respond?
Yeah?
Jim?
Jim?
You're wanting to know what we do around the school?
Yeah, what is our program for school safety?
Every day that I have an officer available, They spend approximately an hour and a half around the school, working traffic, working on the individual intersections, in an attempt to make people stop.
Has anybody ever told you to not write a ticket?
No.
Has anybody ever told your officers not to write a ticket?
No, that's entirely up to the officers at the time that they choose to write a citation.
So why don't you suppose there's as many tickets as Mr. Jutnan wants?
Because the violations might not be as bad. I mean, they might be running it, but they're not running it as bad as Mr. Jutnan is stating.
So how does that evaluation take place? I mean, you have to see it, right?
Right, they have to see it, the officers have to see it. It's determined by the officer at the time when he's making the stop. So, it's the discretion of the officer. And take discretion away from an officer, yeah, it's not good.
So as part of their discretion, Grant, you have, you work with Chief Schaefer, the officers, and the prosecuting attorney on a regular basis as to what's a valid ticket and what's not, whether it's a stop sign violation or a speeding violation. Can you kind of explain as to how you work with, and how the officers come up with their evaluation of those tickets?
Sure. City manager, the way it works with the city, between myself, the police chief, and the prosecutor and Iron Mountain, I'm responsible for some of the civil infractions and traffic tickets, if you will. Some of those come to my office, we review them, and if it's committed in front of the police officer, they can write a ticket. If they don't see it though, then they have to bring it to me. And I have to look at the reports, I have to look at witness statements, I have to look at audio, video. The Norway PD does a nice job of putting everything on their cameras, so we're able to see what happens, and I have to determine whether or not I can meet the burdens required in a court hearing. If there's enough there to issue a ticket, we issue a ticket. If there's not enough there to issue a ticket, we don't issue a ticket. I haven't talked to Chief Schaefer or made any indication, of course, to not issue a ticket, because that's ludicrous, frankly. If there's something that is taking place that you observe or see, you should be issuing a ticket. But you also should not be issuing tickets frivolously or inappropriately. And so when there's civil infraction tickets, they come, if they're committed in front of the officer issues the citation. If it's not witnessed in front of the officer, that evidence comes to me, and then I make a determination whether or not you can meet the burden of proof. Most all misdemeanors, felonies that are committed in the city of Norway, those are handled by the police officers, and they're brought up to the Dickinson County prosecuting attorney, who handles the remainder of criminal charges and works with the Norway PD on, again, all felony charges, all misdemeanor charges over 1 year. I handle just a lot of the civil infractions and the traffic tickets. So much of this goes up to the prosecutor's office in Dickinson County, and our office handles some of the minor traffic offenses, if you will.
Chief Schaefer, do you have a letter from a private property owner, the school, on enforcing traffic on the school grounds?
Excuse me?
Do you have any letters or any kind of direction from the school on issuing tickets on the school grounds?
The school does not stop us from going onto their property to write citations. If we're able to, there's only certain citations you can write on private property. Reckless driving would be one, careless driving, things of that nature.
Moving violation.
But simple moving violations you cannot write on private property, and it's technically considered private property.
What about handicap zone?
Handicap zone we could write on private property.
Okay.
It would be considered a parking ticket, essentially.
So we get a call, we go up and investigate, and then we can write that ticket. Okay. Did you get a call on that?
I haven't gotten one. I don't know which you're exactly referring to.
Well, the one that came up. So.
My officers may have gotten it and took care of it, handled it, talked with if they did, I don't know, did they have contact with you?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
obviously they did make contact.
Yes, I'll admit, it was done.
Okay,
It was.
so
I just
they,
understand what your sign was.
okay, they must have given him a warning. I didn't see a ticket, so that's again up to the discretion of the
Again, has
officer.
anybody told you not to write tickets?
No, sir.
Okay.
That's probably contrary to the point. I'm probably the one that's written most of the citations up by the school, actually. So.
When it comes to the bus stop, we did quite a bit of research on the bus stops locations.
Yes.
We looked into every possible state ordinance dealing with traffic and,
Yes, sir.
school zones and bus stops. What are the specific rules that we've located based on the MCL and the actual law?
Without it directly in front of me, I'm going to quote it, but basically the gist of it is the school and/or the transportation company has all the rights regarding that statute as a choice as to where they want to make a stop or put a stop. I've talked to Lansing, there are traffic services down there, and I have no authority to tell them how to make their stop.
Did you ever tell them to not put on the lights or to put on the lights?
No, sir.
Or where to pick up?
No, sir.
When we
I
made-
asked them, though, to tell me what type of stop it is, because if it is a red light stop, I would have a cop car there.
And when we contacted them, what was the gist of our conversation? Remember?
I contacted them to ask them what type of stop it was going to be, and they said they were going to either make it a yellow light stop, a hazard stop, or in an alley.
Okay.
It was Casey McCormick is the individual I spoke with. He's the ISD bus superintendent, I guess you would call him. He's in charge of it.
So how many individuals did you talk to at the state police, MDOT, different agencies?
It took a while. They don't actually have traffic services available at the MSP anymore. It's a traffic liaison officer. It took about 7 phone calls to actually find him at the state police.
Fair to say you made a number of calls?
Yes, sir. I was on the phone.
For information?
Yes, for information.
Do you ever find anything in the statutes that deal with school zones?
No.
Official school zones?
No.
Come on, it's got to be, right?
25 miles an hour is the only thing I could find.
Grant?
I'm not aware.
Okay. I didn't either. We looked through the statutes. We couldn't find any designated school zones. I did put out information relative to the other managers in the state, asking them for their school zone procedures, and the information, I haven't received a lot of contact back, but that's something I pursue. Whether or not we can, work with Mr. Carlson on whether or not we can actually have a designated school zone, but I'm not sure based on MCL whether that's going to be legal. We talked about maybe putting up some new stop signs with some LED to try and identify, what, or identify the stop more clearly. If we get those in solar, they're $1,000 a piece. If we just get them hooked up electric, there's about $350 a piece. We do have to run the electric cable to the pole. So that'll be labor, whatnot. But probably, I know in looking at speed zone signs in the past with solar, that the batteries can be very expensive over time. So if that's something council would like us to look into further or to move forward with, it's something we should maybe consider. It just adds visual so people see it. Like Chief Schaefer said, we're up there on a regular basis.
Pretty much every day.
Again, there's no comments about not issuing or not being up there. In fact, we had a pretty strong conversation about we are going to be around that school. And I think that it's important for everybody to realize that. The other accusation that's being leveled is about the radar. Request was made to have a handheld radar. Again, we can't just go out to eBay and buy a $100 radar gun. There's some standards, right? What are the, Grant, what are the requirements that we're going to have in order to have an enforceable radar?
Well, there's only a certain number that are actually certified, and there's certain calibration requirements. Chief Schaefer can probably speak more as to exactly, if there's a speeding violation that has to go through the calibration, the records, and it has to be a certified radar detector. I don't have a clue on the costs or what the access is, but I'm sure Chief Schaefer has an idea on if he's looked into that in the past, because frankly, I know, and Neil's made the comment, he doesn't think that we're taking it seriously, but I'm here to tell you that we are, and it's been discussed. And last time he was here, I reiterated that at your request, I looked into the unmanned traffic monitoring device, video cameras, if you will, just trying to brainstorm different ideas to get people to respect, and Neil, and he's making reference and comments about people in the stop signs, and it's in a school area, and the citizens and students have to have our priorities for safety. And we looked into that, and under the Attorney General's opinion, that you can't have those in the state of Michigan, they're illegal as
So
well.
it's illegal to have,
You can't have, unmanned traffic control devices. I thought that you having the idea about the, maybe a stop sign that has the flashing light, a significant cost, but perhaps that'll bring a little more attention to the stop area if that continues to be a concern. But as far as the speeding and the handheld traffic radar, they're very strict requirements, and it's not an eBay purchase.
what about unmarked police car sitting up with radar? There's some entrapment rules, isn't there?
Well, it's, one of the first things is going to be, are you in a marked patrol vehicle? And identify yourself as a vehicle. We've seen some public press, and people unfortunately will sometimes take advantage of people in the public with unmarked vehicles, and sometimes are impersonating police officers. This isn't I don't think Norway wants to have a situation of speed traps and people lying in wait. I think that the diligence needs to continue, making sure that our streets are safe and that people are enforcing the law and working on the speed. And as I told Mr. Jutin last time I was here, thank you for bringing this up and making it a priority. Though we sometimes don't maybe agree with all the incendiary comments, frankly, at the same time, the message is he's worried about the safety of the people in the community and the students, and that's not missed on anybody from what my conversations with the council.
One other item is that Chief Schaefer and I have gone up to the school. We have sat and talked with the principal and with the superintendent, and an option that we are going to talk about at the council is a school safety program that includes school crossing guards and liaison. School crossing guards under the MCL is a requirement. You need to put adults on the crossing. You can't put not putting students out there. But neither the school nor the city have the resources to just do that. And so suggestion we have is if you want to pursue that, that's going to have to go out to referendum to not only the city, but both townships, Norway Township, Waukeeta Township. The cost to run that program for a crossing guard is roughly $10,000 to $15,000.
A base program would be about $11,000.
Right. And then for one officer, because basically we'd be hiring an additional officer, which is roughly $60,000 a year. So, you're looking at about $80,000 to run that program, and the officer could be out in the parking lot, at the corners, during the in and outs, can be in the school working with the students and the administration during the day. And again, the crossing guards, you would need, there are 3 corners that we would have to deal with. So we're looking at probably, what would we say, a couple hours a day?
On average, about 6 hours total, out of all
Yeah,
the
between
intersections. You figure 2 hours for every intersection roughly.
So anyway, we put thought into it, but that is not something we can just do. That's something that we're going to need funding for. So that's something we can have an extended conversation about. So I wanted to make sure we dispelled any of the rhetoric that's out there, that we're not doing anything. We're not going to sit here and have a public argument. I don't think that does the issue, like Mr. Carlson said. It's an important and very important issue, and we take it very seriously, but having a public argument is going to do no one any good. Any personal issues, that's not going to help the safety issues. So we wanted to get that on record.
Thank you. Any comments?
I would like to thank the city voters for their support, and I would like to congratulate Candy. And I'd also like to say thank you to Paul Hayes for his years of service, because I wasn't here the last time. And congratulations to Lee McGinney.
Mr. Mangini?
Congratulations again on being mayor. It's got to be quite the coup to be mayor and president of the school board. I don't believe that's ever happened before. And as far as the school issue, we're all really concerned about the safety. I went through there today, and I stopped and waited. I could have gone by the bus. It was parked there, and I was legal to go by it, but I waited. The bus left. He came to a complete stop, and in the meantime, there were 4 or 5 other vehicles. They all came to a complete stop. And so maybe the word has gotten out there that
we're watching it closer, but I did not see an issue tonight. And that's all I have.
Mr. Oja?
Well, first, I'd like to thank the voters for their support in the last election. Again, Candy, I'd like to congratulate you, and I know what the burdens of mayor are, and I wish you well.
Thank you.
And with this issue up by the school, I know a few years ago, we looked into a mobile speed sign. Is that something we've looked into again, because we had other uses for it besides just this area? Is that something we've considered to at least be able to periodically put it on Chestnut?
Yeah, we were going to ask the county has one on a trailer, and we were going to use that, but they indicated that there were no batteries, the batteries were dead, and we had to buy the batteries in order to use it. I think they went ahead, that's just too expensive for us to, to buy their batteries for them, but I think since then, they put the batteries in it, but now they're using it, since they put the batteries in it. So anyway, we looked into other options for mobile, for speed signs, and like when US 8, we were having a lot of questions about the speed on US 8. On US 8, we were shut down because the MDOT would not allow us to put them on the highway.
Right.
We could probably put them on the side streets, but the cost was, again, you guys are going to have to appropriate us the funds, because they're thousands of dollars, and depending on what kind you get. So if you want to get it on a trailer, it's going to be probably $5,000. On the pole is a couple $1,000, $2,500. But there's a number of different options, and they're helpful. I mean, I know when I go someplace that has one, I mean, Mackinac Bridge, you go across the bridge, you kind of look at your speedometer, and you're more aware of your speed, and I think that it could be, something that's helpful.
That's all.
My only comment tonight is thank you again, and it's an honor to be the first woman to be the mayor of Norway. And also, I do appreciate Mr. Carlson, Mr. Anderson, and our police chief. They are looking into the issues, and we are trying to get things resolved. And that's all I have, and have a good Thanksgiving, everybody. Grant?
No, thank you.
Mr. Anderson?
Well, again, congratulations. Congratulations, Jeremy, and Brett, and Scott for getting back on. So we're going to, you're going to start having some information, passed your way, looking at maybe some workshops, some different things to start bringing you up to speed again on all the different contracts we might have, and and December 1st, we have an in-service day here at the City Hall. So I'll be getting you some information. There's going to be some training opportunities. The staff is smiling and smirking at me, but there might be some opportunities to have you guys come in on that day. So.
Anything, Trish or Mary? No? Meeting adjourned.
Not legally.
I'm supposed to make a motion to adjourn?
That's what I just said. You making that?